So hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first video, and I'm going to be talking about doo-wop, particularly the kind of swing-based doo-wop. And we're going to be looking at some rhythm guitar parts around the 1-6-2-5 chord sequence. So every doo-wop song, certainly the mainstream ones, are very much around the one chord. I'm going to do all this in G, by the way, just to make life easy. So the one chord, G or G6. The sixth chord is an E minor seventh. 2 chord is an A minor 7, or A minor, as you wish. And then the 5 is a D7. So you have songs like Blue Moon. So, part of the reason I'm doing this is because I have some arthritis in my hands, and some days it gets quite difficult to play full bar chords. And the other thing is, if you have a piano player in the band, you may not want to be playing the full bar chords. Remember, if you're playing these 6-string chords and the piano player is playing anywhere up to 10 notes, and then you've got 4 vocalists, maybe a horn section, you've got an awful lot of people overlapping the same stuff, often in the same register, and it can get very muddy. So if you don't want to do that, let's look at some alternatives. So the first alternative we'll look at is based on the kind of chords that the big band player Freddie Green used to play, also very similar to the Western swing chords of Eldon Shamblin. And these have a number of advantages. Partly, you can reduce the amount of movement your left hand has to do, both that way and changing finger shapes. So let's start with just a basic G. So what is a G? Okay, so a G chord, just the basic cowboy G, or open campfire G, is 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, and an octave. Or you could play this one where you have these top 2 strings instead of same idea. So it's all 1, 3, 5, where you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 can be the flat 7 or the natural 7th, major 7th. 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's see how much we can simplify a G chord and still have it be a G chord. So you can either look at the top of the string set and just play those 3. So the root's on the top. Or you could look at the bottom. Well, if you try and do, you kind of can't, because you've got 2 notes on the same string. So what can we do? Well, we know we've got the root there, 3rd fret, E string. And then we could skip the next string. And then we could play this one, which is the flat 7th. So that's the other G. Go down 2 notes to the flat 7. And then we've got this one here, that's the 3rd. Well, what's kind of cool is if you look at that version of a G chord, in other words, I can use the full E shape with my little finger. If I take my little finger off, I've got the G7. Well, if I remove some fingers and shuffle around a bit, I can play it like this. So G on the E string, A string muted with the fat part of this finger, and then 3rd fret on the D string with your middle finger, and that's the flat 7. That's an F, and then a B, which is the 4th fret on the G string. And the cool thing about that is you've outlined what the chord is, the G7, but you've left a few things kind of unsaid, so to speak. So you've not identified, is it a natural 5th, or are you getting all jazzy and doing a flat 5? There's no extensions like 6th, 9th, 11th, whatever. So your piano player and your vocalists have the latitude to create those extra harmonies without you getting in the way. So that's our G. I'm going to skip the E minor for the moment, and we'll come back to that. So let's now look at the fourth chord, which is either an A minor 7 or it could be a C, depending on the root note. And the reason I say that is because a C and an A minor 7 are in fact the same notes. The only difference is with a C, you've got a C in the root, and with an A minor 7th, you've got an A in the root. A, of course, is in the C scale, right? It's there, right? It's the sixth. So you can more or less swap them round pretty much as you want. The reason being that in doo-wop, you can't in all kinds of music, but in doo-wop particularly, you've usually got the bass vocalist or the bass or the left hand of the piano or all three playing the root note that tells the listener what the tonality is. So you as a guitar player, you're kind of filling that middle ground. So you can play a C or an A minor 7, and they're more or less the same thing, more or less interchangeable. So how do we make them more interchangeable? So if we look at a C chord, again you've got 1, 3, 5, and you may have a 7th. So how can we play that? Well, you might be familiar with this C9th shape, or indeed this standard C7 shape. Well, if you look at that shape, so put your hands on the guitar on that 3rd fret to do this C7, and then just look at the bottom 4 strings. So forget this first finger, it doesn't matter. Then you've only got this, you've got these 3. Well, do we have to play the C at the bottom? Well, we can, but if everybody else is doing it, or if it's actually an A minor and you don't really want that strong C root note, you can move it down to the G. Remember the G is in the C scale, it's the 5th. So you've got 3rd fret on the E string, muted A string, just like the last one, 2nd fret on the D string, and 3rd fret on the G string. Well, if I shuffle fingers around a bit, so I do it with my middle finger on the G, 1st finger on the D string, and ring finger on the G string, I've got this. And I remember I'm muting the A. So now I can go from a G to a C, and all I've got to do is swap 2 fingers and move 1 fret. It's a lot easier than trying to do this or this to this or whatever. There's much less movement. So you've got to that. Now at some point you're going to need a D as well. You're going to need the 5 chord. Well, we'll just move that up 2 frets. Right, so you've got C, D. So now we can go G. Let's just play a blues for a minute. We'll add the minor in a sec. So G, 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 C, 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 G, 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 C, G. Now we're going to go to the D. So that's almost no movement. If you're playing 2-3 hours, that really helps. There's another nice side benefit of this, which is a thing called voice leading, which is where you kind of have notes that join your chords up. If you listen to what's happening on the G string particularly, when I play that, all these 3 notes are together. Which is kind of cool. It sort of guides the listener to the next thing. And it also doesn't tend to get in the way of vocalists in doo-wop. Right, so now we've got to get the 2nd chord. And the 2nd chord is our E minor 7. Well, just like the C and the A minor 7 are more or less the same chord. I mean, they are the same notes in the chord, just organised differently. A G, particularly a G sixth, and of course that was a D minor 7, a G sixth, and an E minor 7th are basically the same thing. So if you think about, and you can see this visually, right? If you know this C shape, that's a G chord, that's a G major chord. If I take the little finger off, I've got my E minor 7. Remembering that E is in the G scale as the sixth. So a G sixth is in fact an E minor 7, just reorganised a bit, same as the C and the A minor. They're what's called relative minors. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can actually, it means that we can ignore the E minor 7 if we want to, so long as the rest of the band is playing it fairly strongly. So if we think about Blue Moon, if you kind of sing along in your head, we've got, we can play it like this. If I want to put the E minor in, let's do the same trick as we did before. We're going to go E, and an E minor has a flatted third, which is a G, and then we can put the D in, which is the 7th. By the way, you can see this if you're familiar with this E9 shape. If you move that finger down one, you've got an E minor 9th. If I leave the 9th off, we have an E minor 7. Well, that's all very well and good, but again, it's a bit of a stretch. Why don't I just move this root note down to the E string? So now I'm playing a B in the bass. B is the 5th of the E chord. It's also the 3rd of the G chord. And I'm going to mute the A string again. You'll see something common here. It's got a really nice kind of rich minory sound, and it doesn't have the root note in, so it lets the rest of the band do that part. It lets the bass vocalist have the space. So if we put those together, we've got G7, E minor 7 with a B in the bass, and then we can do this, our regular C if you want to be that real majory sound, or we can do the C7, and then the D we can do that one, or whichever one we want. So now we've got G to the E minor 7. Well, what happens if we actually do want that A minor 7, which kind of your ear wants to do rather more than this C7? Well, if you look at an A minor or A minor 7, leave this finger off, so you've only got that note, and that note, which is all 5th fret, A, D, G. That's the easiest chord in the world to play, apart from that. So now we've got G7, E minor 7, A minor 7, D7. Now it's sounding like doo-wop, right? And that's much, much easier on the hands than you can switch them around if your hands are feeling up to it. You know, when you get to a solo, you know, if there's a sax solo or a piano solo, so some of the chords and the vocals have dropped out, you might want to add some more notes and do some bigger chords. That's fine. You don't have to do this all the way through a song. Let's just have a quick look at what that does to our voice leading. Again, let's look at what's happened on the G string. So we've got ba, 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 which is kind of nice. It does get a bit tedious playing that all night. And if you've got a solo and you want to be able to stretch out, or you've got a song where the backing vocals maybe are a little bit more sparse or percussive than like long R's and O's, there's some things you can do to have some passing chords between these. So we've got our G7, we've got our E minor 7, and wouldn't it be nice to have something kind of between that and the A minor 7? Well, if you take these two fingers, so that's your middle finger that's on the 5th fret of the E string, and your ring finger that's on the 7th fret, that's on the 7th fret of the G string. Leave that first finger where it is on the 5th fret, move these two down one, you've got a B flat diminished, which is quite a nice passing note to the A minor 7. So if we put those together, you get E minor 7, diminished, A minor 7, and that's actually really very easy to play. You can make it sound like you're working a lot harder than you actually need to. So, and this also works quite well for kind of the 2/4 style, because you've got a very strong bass note. So you've got you can also do a bit of alternating bass with this finger between the E and the A strings. It's just whatever you can achieve is fine. None of that's necessary to convey the song. So let's look at a typical doo-wop bridge, and there's really two that you see a great deal, which is what's called a 2-5-1. So in G that would be a A minor, D, G, A minor, D, G, that kind of thing, which is like, again, Blue Moon. Suddenly appear before me. Well, you can do that with all the... That switch, by the way, is just me switching same fret, same finger between the E and the A string. So it's again, it's zero effort, same chords. The other one you get is the rhythm changes, where it goes to the 3rd. Again, it's the same shapes. B7, E7, A7, D7, G, and passing diminished if that's what you want to do. So that's it for the kind of fairly simple chords. I will just show you one other kind of cool thing. So if you're into the whole, retro music stuff, the other thing you've got here is bass lines, walking bass lines. So you can do voice leading on the E string and the A string. So that G is great. That E minor 7 is actually also, because remember E minor 7 and G are the same thing, it's that G with the B in the bass. So you can do and you've basically got the idea of a lot of Western swing chords, a lot of the Eldon Shamblin, although he takes it a lot further. Okay, so that's the low stuff. Sometimes you want to do something simple that's got a little bit more sparkle to it, a bit more high end. And taking what we've already established, which is that the G and E minor are the same thing more or less, and the C and the A minor 7th are more or less interchangeable, we can go look for other 3-note G, C, D, E minor chords. Well, one place you've got them is with this typical D7 chord. If I find the G on my B string, which is up here on the 8th fret, and I put a D, sorry, this has gone out of tune, but never mind. So if we play that, that's a G chord. Well, okay, so where's the E minor 7th chord? Well, we kind of know it's... Oh look, it's the same thing. Look at the top of that E minor 7. It's that shape. So we can just play it twice. Well, then we want our A minor 7/C, whichever you want to call it. And a nice way to do that is to take the top of this C6, which you should already know, or you may already know, and just play those 3 notes. So that's the 9th fret on the G string, the 10th fret on the B string, and the 8th fret on the E string. Well, that's got a kind of minory sort of sound, but it's also a very 6th sound as well. So we can combine those two. Well, where's the D going to be? Well, that's going to be up 2 frets. The slide is quite nice if you do it. The other thing you can do here is, instead of kind of, and this is again good if you've got sore hands, so I use this quite a lot. You swap this chord around from being a G with a D triad to being a G6th. It's easier because you're not squishing your fingers together so much, and that is the 9th fret on the G string, 8th fret on the B string, 7th fret on the E string. Which sounds very minor, right? Well, that's because minors and 6ths are related to each other. Again, let's play the same thing. Also very good if you're doing if you need to play arpeggios. That's pretty good. Again, also great for imitating lap steel guitars. But again, they're all related, and it's nice to be able to switch between. The reason it's worth knowing those as well is because these kind of, depending on the guitar you've got, these work more or less up to about C or D. So if you're playing like a big arch top, it's quite hard to do. All the way up here, because your 14th fret isn't necessarily so accessible. So if you're having to play in D, well, you can go to go to that. You can also, if you have to play with root notes on the A string, like C, D, E flat particularly, then if you're playing in, let's do something in E flat. So you might want to go back to your standard bar chord E flat. A lot of people play it like that. I can't. So like that, and then, well, what have we got after E flat? Well, we got C minor. Well, we can just go back to that, or minor. So same chords, it's just the first one that you have to change. It's almost the same. If you find, again, if your hands are hurting, you can just play those strings. In fact, you can play those strings for the whole thing, depending on the chord sequence. You've also got a root note here. So normally in E flat, the root note is on the 6th fret of the A string. But if you go up to the 10th fret and play it the other way round, you've just moved to not having a voicing with that E flat in the bottom of the chord. Again, good if you've got the rest of the band hammering away on that bottom chord. Yeah, so that's all I can think of that would be useful. That gets me by a lot of things. and I'll do another video on turnarounds, which is what you do in between verses when generally nobody is singing. I'll be back.